Welcome back. We're going to take a little bit of a technical break. We were talking, I think, before we took the break there, JB, I think we were talking about what drove you to law school, and that was like people going to the lawyers to solve their problems and do things better. Right. So when I met you and you were teaching negotiations, I think we talked about there's some funny stories that might have happened to me in law school and in your class. And I will say that negotiations actually was very impactful. If you're interested in knowing that, I'd be happy to share it with you at some point in time in this conversation. Because I use it in places that I never thought that I never imagined that I would use it. So, how long you were Macaulay Burtch for a long time? Is it still Macaulay Burtch?
No, I started at Hunton.
Yeah.
And then I went to a small law firm that became it was McSweeney, Stutz, and Burtch, and then it became McSweeney, Burtch, and Crump. Well, I left that in 2000, and in 2001 joined Alexander Macaulay and Burtch. And now, when I turned 70, I decided I don't want to be a partner in a law firm anymore. My son wanted to start a law firm, so my son started this law firm, which he named after me, Burtch Law, out in Henrico County, and that's where I practice now. So I've gone full circle. I was an associate in a law firm, and I came all the way around, and I'm now an associate in a law firm.
Well, I remember you saying in school whenever you were my professor, and that would have been, 2000, that would have been 2003, spring 2004, because I graduated in 07. So it would have been spring 2000. I can't remember what year I took your class. But anyways, you had said that, at that point in time that you were practicing the least amount of hours, you were making the most amount of money you've ever made. And that was, I think that was 18 years ago.
That's right.
I think every time I talked to you, you said you're on the way, you're trying to retire. So I will tell you if we can get into why I think I thought about bringing you in here.
Sure.
I called you a long time ago, and I've been kind of kicking this idea about trauma-informed law around with you, and we chatted. And right now, I will tell you, I'm pivoting the name to really Trauma Underground, which it's really what I'm focusing on it's a trauma-focused network for everybody, not just for lawyers, not just for doctors, not just for medical professionals. Because what I'm recognizing is this new concept of trauma, which I think is an old concept as you and I talk.
Right.
Is this now being fleshed out and people are willing to have the conversation? I will tell you, I don't know what year this was. So I have all these notebooks I keep all my thoughts in, right? They're not organized. There's 7 of them. I got no clue where stuff is. And so this was, I would have come back I went to a business mastery course in spring. It would have been January. I think it was January 6th of 2023. And then this is the next entry.
Wow.
So this would have been, and I have your name right up here. Where is it? Right here, page 6. Do you see that? Burtch.
There it is.
What are we not talking about? So right here, what I have is, so everyone thinks they can be a lawyer was what the name of this episode was going to be.
Right.
So everyone thinks they can be a lawyer.
Everyone thinks they can be a lawyer.
So I have a couple questions here. I think I'd still like to get the answers. What is the identity of a lawyer?
That is a very complex question.
I know it is.
It's a question that's changed over time.
I hear it. Give it to me, baby.
There was a time when, if you go back to the English system, where they have barristers and solicitors. Barristers are the guys who show up in court, and I say guys because there weren't any women doing it at that time. There are now, of course. Solicitors are the people that drafted documents and did deals. Now, that's morphed a bit over the years, but there was that division. And so the identity of a lawyer, as it became an American phenomenon, was a person who was comfortable with conflict, a person who enjoyed learning the rules, learning about the law, a person who could be trusted, because to be a really competent lawyer, at least when I started, and I started late in the history of the United States, but to be a really competent lawyer, you had to be trusted. Clients come to people they trust. So trust was a very important thing. And the lawyer has to be a person who can keep confidences. I mean, that's the most sacred thing to me about my role as a lawyer. So the identity of a lawyer I think, is a combination of all those things. And what law school does is law school kind of abuses and beats our minds and our brains and our thinking process.
It's almost like a type of hazing.
It is it's a type of hazing, but it's worse than hazing because hazing
because you pay for it. You pay hundreds of thousands of dollars.
That's right, and it goes on for 3 years, and then you go into a legal organization which actually does it more effectively, and it never ends. But the point is, you take a different way of thinking, which is, what is the source of this problem? You're telling me a story. You've got a problem. You're telling me about your emotions, your feelings. You're telling me about all the peripheral things that happen around the problem.
Well, you're talking about what the reality is, but when we get to law school, I feel like we've taken the emotional concept out of it.
Absolutely. The emotional concept gets removed. And what happens is that all that data that we take in from a client is in law school narrows that down. What are the facts? What are the facts that will establish a particular legal theory that we can establish and upon which we can win?
Yeah.
And that's what law school
and it
teaches
takes
you.
out of even consideration when you're in law school. The clients will do things that are in direct conflict with what is their best interest.
Absolutely.
And they would do
They
things.
don't recognize that.
Right. Well, that's part of what the work I'm doing because I got so frustrated with it. What's the do you have a I want to find out more about this, but do you have what's the most outrageous thing that that you feel comfortable sharing on that a client, just generally what a client did in the middle of whatever type of case that they had? Like is there anything come to mind like that just a client totally, this is going to be an adult podcast, but I used to tell my clients, like, the cases, they'll say, well, Charlie, what can I do? It's just like, just don't fuck up your case. Everyone messes up their case after they come in the door. Everyone does it, And so, like, what can you think of something?
Early on, I was representing a lady who had been, and I was taking this was not just employment relations. And
when you start a law firm, you got to eat.
I was taking on everything.
You got to eat what you kill. I know. I've been there.
I represented this lady who had a serious accident that I thought she could get some real money on. And she was ready to fight. She'd do anything she could do. I was all for it, or she was all for it. And then I called her and I said, the other side wants to take your deposition next Tuesday down at my office. And she said to me, I'm not coming down to your office. And I said, well, look, this is really important to make your case go forward. She said, I'm not coming down to your office. I said, well, maybe, just maybe, I could persuade them to bring the court reporter out to your apartment and we could sit around your table.
Is this 70s or 80s?
This was the 80s.
80s? Okay.
Yeah. We could sit around your table and they could ask you the questions there. I'm not doing that. I'm not having my deposition taken. I never, the case kind of ended right about then because she would not do anything to get what she said she needed to have. But that, that's one area where I feel a client just did something crazy. The other time I'm going to be more veiled in this description. I was representing a national company, and we were negotiating with the union, and I was the chief negotiator. And we got to the point where I thought if in a couple more weeks we were going to be at what is technically called an impasse with the union. And labor relations, that has a specific meaning. And when you're impasse, you can put in the offer that you had on the table to the union. You can actually give it to the people. So it makes them get more money while this is going on. That's legal. Well,
that's illegal or legal?
It's legal. It's legal at impasse. The company
at impasse,
the company.
And is impasse declared?
Well, it's declared in the sense that you have a number of bargaining sessions where nobody moves.
Okay, so it's like everyone knows we're in it.
Everybody, it's like ice.
Okay.
You know, when it's frozen, you're at impasse.
Yeah, it's like strikes me as that chess move, like en passant. You know, like which very few people know. Okay, anyway, go ahead. Yeah. So impasse, you do this weird thing. So yeah, so tell me what happened.
So we're there. Well, so what happened was I'm on this phone call to my clients, and I'm telling them, in about 6 weeks, we're going to be where we want to be, and we've been working hard to get here. And they said, well, no, we're putting that offer in immediately. And I said, it would be an unfair labor practice to put in that offer immediately. They said, and this was the 80s. This is when you need closure. Everything had to have closure. We need closure on this, and we're going to do this. They did it, and that cost them years of labor litigation, and I just told them, don't do it. And they did it.
Have you ever you've represented a lot of clients, right?
Sure. Yeah, sure have.
Do you experience or have experienced in the past 50 years? How does it exhibit that a client is just clearly, have you ever exhibited, how do I want to ask this? So I do a lot of criminal defense and domestic relations. Right. So a lot of my clients are in jail. Recently we were in jail or no longer have their kids sleeping under their house. So it's a little impactful, but how you make your money and how you pay your bills and, those things are pretty impactful to people as well. When I talk about someone walking in, it's kind of almost in a fight or flight, like on the verge of fight or flight. And the client, typically the events are such. They ask a question, you spend 2 or 3 hours specifically answering that question, being in detail, and it looks like they're participating in the conversation. It looks like they're paying attention. Right. And the next time you talk to them, they ask the same question.
But I want to tell you a story that's fairly recent that just blew the pins out from under me. Then we might get to the story that you described. I had a man sent to me. This was a friend of another lawyer, and she referred him to me because she thought he had a good case of wrongful discharge against his employer. I wasn't going to represent him because
you only represent him.
I represent employers, but I told her I'd be happy to talk to him and get him to exactly the right place that could help what he needed. He came into my office. His wife was with him, and I don't usually like to do that. I do not like to interview husband and wives together. You always get a different story when that happens, but that's what happened.
Practice tip to future lawyers out there. That's really important. Go ahead.
Yeah, don't do it. But anyway, they came in, they sat down, and we went through this, and I noticed a couple of things. He really stunk of cigarettes. I mean, stunk of cigarettes. It's not like he'd been smoking. He stunk of cigarettes. And he worked for a large healthcare employer from which he had just been let go. That I thought was important. As I was getting the story from him, there was this detached attitude. He told me everything clearly. He told me every question I asked, but it was just very detached. And I said to him, I know who I'm going to call for you. He's a friend of mine. I'm going to set up an appointment for you because I think you really have something here. Is that okay with you? And he said, oh, yeah, of course, that'd be great, But there was a lack of enthusiasm in that answer. And then they went home. I called my friend. I got the appointment all set up. He said, JB, I've got really bad news. He said, Fred killed himself yesterday.
Suicide. Yeah, suspected that. Yep.
And yes, I went through all the guilt. What could I have done? What didn't I pick up? How could I have been a more compassionate lawyer? Where did I drop the ball? Yes, I went through all those. But something worse than that happened to me, Charlie. Every piece of crap that I have dealt with in the last 50 years came crashing down on my head. And I was paralyzed for about 2 days.
After you learned of his suicide?
After I learned of his suicide. His suicide opened up something inside of me that had been locked away, of other people's pain that had been dumped on me,
Right.
of places where, there was hurt I could do nothing about. And it was Pandora's box.
So this is an open forum. I'm kind of that's kind of why I wanted to start this fucking podcast, quite frankly, is what are we not talking about? In the recovery of villainy is kind of personal for me. 2017, I realized when the Vegas shooting happened, I realized that it was only going to be a few stops on the train that I was on. I wasn't sure when those stops would happen. But, I remember some blonde saying, why this guy hurt all these people that didn't hurt him? And my mind said, yet. Because everyone I haven't met yet hasn't hurt me yet. Like I'd been practicing for 9 or 10 years doing, the worst of worst that people could be charged of. I've done double murder jury trials and, family reunification cases. And the clients are always, their lives are so complicated. They've made their situation very difficult. Right. And you and I were talking even before we got on set about just that it seems like people don't want answers to the problem before it starts. They want solutions after they made the worst case possible.
That's right.
And then they want that on a dime. And that's the problem with that is like, especially with law, I've now realized is, and this goes back to, I think, what we were talking about the change in kind of like the law school and system.
And lawyer identity.
And lawyer identity, right. Is that we've taken the humanity out of the client and out of what we do.
Yes.
Like to a certain extent. And when I say identity, the human identity, I mean like the ability to deal with vulnerable and deep, difficult emotions. When you look, I've taken on, child rape cases and things like that. And so like and that's people I think have no concept of the amount of compassion that it takes. And I think you're one of the lawyers that has the ability to do it. There are some lawyers that do not have the ability to extend the compassion.
That's true.
There are some lawyers that don't have that ability to walk into that room where someone's been accused of absolutely something fucking awful and treat them with dignity, respect, without blame, shame, or judgment. And I will tell you, I'll just share with you, like my personal philosophy, I'm doing this whole trauma thing. But blame, shame, and judgment, I think, is part of the reason why it's so dangerous. Is it seems to be, I don't know if it happened through all generations, just this one, I'm sure there was a bunch there because all of our sacred texts talk about that. But it really literally becomes the thing that threatens a human being with detachment from society. It's literally the whip that tells you, if you shame on you, it's your fault, you're a bad boy, go over there. And until you are remorseful, but remorseful always became, I'm sorry, I just want back together. And so it's so poignant what you said there about kind of that open up the Pandora's box. I mean, I've talked to so many lawyers, clients committing suicide after they call them up and give them what the sentencing offer is.
Right.
I had a client commit suicide after getting out of jail. I've had some die during overdose on fentanyl and all that stuff. And it hits. And can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What would you recommend lawyers do right now that might be listening to this? What would you recommend? Because you, like one thing that JB does, I'll share with the listeners, and you can expound on your own. When in Virginia, especially if a lawyer doesn't pass the character and fitness exam, you're one of the people. I don't know how many people.
I help people get through the character and fitness committee but basically it's not doing any legal magic. It's basically working on that human being.
That's what my trauma work is now turned into.
That's what it's about.
Right. So I believe that the way we can build out our existences, whether it's the physiological existence in this world, thought existence in our cognitive, or emotional existence in our emotional, is I think of this Venn diagram: knowledge, access, and control. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I think of all of these things kind of interacting, and I can show the diagram on a different day, but it's we have these poignant experiences, and then we kind of experience that. How did that experience change your ability to move forward and handle it in the future after you had those 2 days of kind of dark night of the soul?
Maybe I was expecting that if something negative happened of that sort, that I had ways to put it into a better reality than somehow attributing some level of fault to me. I'm perfectly willing to admit my own mistakes. Okay, I'm a lawyer. I make a lot of mistakes. Ask my wife. There's no lack of mistakes. I'm not ashamed to take accountability for my mistakes. But one of the problems of law practice is that people dump stuff on us. that we have no power over, but we're supposed to hold and carry for them.
Right.
We're supposed to carry their guilt, their shame, their remorse. And we've got to understand that's their problem, not ours.
So I challenge that.
Sure.
Not the concept. I would say that in my experience, I think we're setting ourselves up for failure. Because how many times have I heard in the hallways of court lawyers kind of like dismissing the client, saying, "You're the client. I've got this. I'm the lawyer. I've got this." And so often the way we lawyers step in is that we're the hero that's come in, that they are Princess Leia locked away in the Death Star, right? And we're going to jump into the Millennium Falcon with our group and go in and save them.
Right.
And so I think that becomes the very precipice that this gets pushed over the because once you tell them at the beginning when you're trying to fix the problem, I'm the one in charge and I can do it all, then you actually disempower them.
Right.
You detach them from the very consequences and aspects of what's going on, while out of the other side of your mouth asking them to do things that are going to help their case. But at the same point in time, at all the places where you could empower them, we don't. And I find that whenever I empower the client in a particular way, that I seem to get more buy-in that way and less mistakes. And all these lawyers that have these clients that say, well, they seem pretty regulated in the office, you know? Have you ever had any regulated clients in the office that come across just fine in the office and then do crazy things aside from just the other ones you're talking about? Man.
Yeah, but the great thing about the way I like to talk to clients, I'd like to have them sit at a little table in my office and we just have a conversation about what happened. And I can't tell you how many times, I'll use a specific example, when I've been representing a discharged CEO or CFO of a big company, and they sit there in my office and as we get into a nice conversation, they display for me personally, live, the exact things they did that caused the board of directors to pull the plug on them.
Do you have any mechanisms or have found any ways? I call it cognitive emotional hypnosis, quite frankly, because when you get the client to open up a little bit and you create rapport, it's better to ask permission than it is to ask for forgiveness.
Right.
It's the opposite than what everyone talks. Everyone says it's better to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. And I find that becomes a selfish manner because we want what we want at whatever cost.
Right.
Saying that I must ask permission and then always ask forgiveness for anything that I did beyond, that seems to build the relationship from the very, very beginning and actually starts to impart some agency and power and empowerment to the client.
Well, I do something that may be similar to that, but I would describe it differently.
Yeah.
I've learned with clients, if they're big corporations and they're executives or representatives, or if it's one person with the problem, I've learned to take the approach, I want them to teach me, okay? I make them into the of how this situation got to where it is.
Excellent.
And the thing is that empowers them to tell their story their way. Right. I can ask whatever questions I want to ask because they trust me more if I'm hearing their story their way.
Right.
You know. And very often what happens is when it comes to saying the one key to the case that they've been trying to stay away from, teach me how this could happen, because here's kind of what the law requires, or here's what the legal standards are. And they'll say, oh, you must want to know. And when I hear that, oh, you must want to know, here it comes.
Right.
But you've built an atmosphere of trust,
safety,
and mutuality, and safety. And when you do that, then you have those real conversations. Now, I've had that blow up in my face. I've got to confess that. I was with a CEO of a major Richmond corporation, and his regular law firm was conflicted out because he was the one accused of doing the deed. And I was in his office and I was having this kind of conversation. I was beginning to get what was coming out. And I asked him this one question. I can't remember what it was. And he said, I would only tell my pastor, something like that. And It blew my mind. Number one, I obviously had crossed some kind of internal boundary line with him of what lawyers were supposed to do.
Right.
I'd crossed that line, but I had touched something that he...
Don't go there.
Don't go there. Yeah.
When we start talking about what's going on,
Yeah.
I introduced this concept of safety word. My safety word's mango, by the way.
Mango.
Patrick Lencioni, are you familiar with Patrick Lencioni?
No, I'm not.
So he's got a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Mm-hmm. He builds it out in a triangle, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of need. Mm-hmm. At the pinnacle of the pyramid is the results, not see the results that we could achieve, mm-hmm. because the client will not hold themselves accountable,
right,
to what you thought they committed to in the office.
Right. Right.
Would you say that's the number one reason why we cannot be successful as lawyers? Is when we don't have clients that will hold themselves accountable,
yes.
to what they committed to doing to help the case.
That certainly is one of the biggest problems we have as lawyers.
So the Patrick Lencioni 5 Dysfunctions of a Team builds that out.
Yeah.
And then there's 2 levels below it.
What are they?
So the way it goes, the 5 dysfunctions, if you build it from the bottom up,
mm-hmm.
is lack of trust,
mm-hmm.
like fear of conflict, inability to commit, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results.
So he joins or correlates trust with the ability to commit, right?
Correct. Yeah, So it's
critical.
trust. And I've now added a level below that, neurological safety.
Okay.
So now polyvagal theory is talking about like what's going on with our parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems mm-hmm. coming down, because now we know that there's millions of neurons in the gut called the enteric neurological system, all the smooth muscle of the gut. And so now we can correlate with all this stuff back from Chinese medicine and other things with meridians. There's now a correlation between the brainstem, C10, which is where the vagus nerve comes from. And you can correlate this with, so the social engagement system is the most recent node of the parasympathetic nervous system, controls all of your facial expressions, even down to the tightness and tone of your inner ear muscles, which determine the tightness or tone of your eardrums. Yeah. So when you go into a fight or flight state, really what's happening is dorsal vagal is shutting down, which anything super diaphragmatic is a different type of vagus nerve. Mm-hmm. So the client literally loses, and sometimes we lose facial expressions. Have you ever noticed
that cold look?
Right.
Look
you ever,
on your
you,
face.
like,
Sure.
And so now understanding, if we start understanding and correlating that mm-hmm. with the first step to fight, flight, or freeze,
right?
That's the first step that must happen, because
so it's physiological.
It's physiological, right? And that's why the safety. So what I'm teaching the clients now is to start tapping into essentially the what I've now recognized, and you can get them to see this pulse of the neurological system, and then you can start seeing it in their behavior and the facial expressions. But it's incredible, like this. It all like the inner ear muscle will slacken when that shuts down. So the eardrums are looser. What does a loose drum head pick up?
Much less.
It's a lower frequency. So like predator growls, footsteps, not human voices. It actually doesn't pick up human voices.
It filters out.
Right. And now neuroscience, the book Nicole Vignola's Rewire, you get in there and she talks about the optical cortex network of the brain. Looking straight forward, the same optical cortex that is what's used for the foraging maneuvers.
Right.
One has connection to the sympathetic nervous system through the amygdala. One doesn't. Yeah. Could you imagine? Like just all these things about our neurology that actually add to the difficulties. Yeah. It's just incredible. Let's take a small break, and when we come back, I want to talk to you about your book. And I also, my notes from a year and a half, 2 years ago are that we're going to talk about an RBG quote, but I need to make sure I look that up to see what it is. More in tune. We're all going to find out.
We'll find out.
All right. Excellent. So see you soon.